Karen, we're about to start.
All right. G- good
Yeah.
afternoon. It's always kind of crazy when we do these right here. Um, we're good. Okay. Let's go on for what we see here. Good afternoon. My name is Omari Salisbury, and I'm being joined by our morning show host, TraeAnna Holiday. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Ready to get into this discussion.
All right, so we wanted to take an hour right here and have a discussion around the protest and progress around it, and just kind of like talking about it in a black media sense. Also in regards to how black media has covered the protests, but then also some of the voices that are out there, what we're hearing in the community. And so we try to put together a pretty diverse situation here with ourselves, of course, Tony B, Rainier Avenue Radio, and then also Marcus Green is going to be joining us here shortly from the South Seattle Emerald. It's Tony B, what's up, man?
Oh, you see, I got to do some shameless self-promotion with the mask. Anyway,
I'm at you, man. Tony. First of all, I never got a chance to publicly thank you for actually for filling in for me. I think it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Thank you for that. Can you take a few minutes before we get going here and tell our audience kind of about you and about Rainier Avenue Radio, what you guys have going on over there? I know I was joking with Marcus earlier that you interview more people. Rainier Avenue Radio interviews more people in a week than I think me and Marcus combined. Like, you guys stay very busy over there, so you can share with us like what Rainier Avenue Radio is all about.
certainly thank you for that opportunity. And likewise, I'd like to welcome everyone from Rainier Avenue Radio who's listening right now to Converge Media. And Omari, you may have heard of them, but this is a show that they do every morning and have done incredible work and continue to do incredible work. And so for those of you who are hearing about Rainier Avenue Radio for the first time, we're a community radio station. In the sense of what I believe a community radio station is, and that is that we represent the voices, issues, and artistic expressions of South Seattle. Now, that doesn't mean that we do that exclusively, but we live in a very diverse community, and I think it's important that the narrative of our community is shared because we have so much diversity in our community. Now, having said that, news happens all around the city, all around the state, all around the country, and all around the world, and we certainly do our due diligence. Because being in a community doesn't mean being isolated. It also means getting information outside of those boundaries to bring into the community, along with pushing information out. And so we have over 70 different members of our community who host shows
Wow.
on the air. We broadcast in multiple languages: Filipino, Vietnamese, Fijian, Spanish. We have a robust sports program where we broadcast high school sports. We'll see what that's going to look like this year. And we provide shows in critical conversations like this one. And I think, like everyone else, when the pandemic happened, for us, it was a matter of shifting our resources, shifting our energy into providing valuable and critical information to the members of our community. And that's what I believe a community radio station does during times of crisis. You hone in on the needs of your community. And so we are unashamedly, very proudly that. But at the same time, yes, we, being media, there is certainly, a need to connect with all communities. And, that's my little spiel there. I'll save more as we talk more specifically about the impact of Black media and some things that we're doing in this city that I think, are visionary and breaking ground in how communities can learn to talk for themselves, share their own narratives, be their own newscasters, create their own media content.
We need one more click on there, Producer. I can definitely say this is that you, Rainier Avenue Radio, kind of set a standard around COVID. I mean, it was crazy because it's like, people see me out here and I'm real visible because we're on TV, which makes me more visible. But I don't think anybody in our community worked harder than Rainier Avenue Radio, and continues to work hard to be able to get information out to the community. And we saw that, like, you guys set the standard for sure. Definitely when COVID came out and COVID hit, you're out there ahead of the curve, interviews, information, and everything else. So, I never get tired of saluting the dean of the class, you know what I'm saying, Mr. Tony B. And I would encourage everybody who is watching this program, we need to get out and support Rainier Avenue Radio, support Black media, support what they're doing there. And you can see it's a visionary, talking about 70 different people there, all kinds of shows in different languages covering different things. And as I said, it's just an honor and a pleasure to be able to rap with you today.
Looking forward to this. Thank you for putting this together, Omari, man. I appreciate your leadership. Hey, Trey.
Hey, Tony B, man. As I said, when you were here while Omari was out on vacation, it was so great to work with you, man. Truly an honor. And me and you actually talked maybe almost 2 years ago about how important it was for us to be telling our own stories and really have these media channels. So I'm really happy that we can do things together. It makes me excited. Yes.
Yeah, let's pave the way. Let's create a paradigm shift in independent media and how independent media works together. Independent media has primarily, you can call this fact-based opinion or whatever, but it's been primarily white, and it hasn't been inclusive, and that's just the kind of way that it's had to work. And just coming from a major market background with everybody with small budgets working together is a way that we can all share information, and there's enough room for everybody. And so I'm just really digging what y'all are doing and how you open up these channels and invite me in and invite the Emerald in and lead the way. And so, yeah, I'm ready for the conversation, but I got to always give y'all props too, man.
That's good love.
You see, this is good stuff. When Black media hooks up, it's just all complimentary, man. So we got to do this more often. Tony B. So I mean, there's the big news today. So let's just start there. Want to get your thoughts on the resignation of the resignation of Chief Best, and two. A lot of conversation in our community, at least on our platforms. You can let us know as well on your platforms about the relationship between the city council and Chief Best.
Well, Omari, I'll give you from my perspective, the news as I see it, from talking to the community, from hearing from the community. The initial reaction is, again, the sisters ain't happy. Now, that might be, and again, I'm not telling people how to think or what to think, but it brings up an issue of the support that was not there or was there for, Chief Best or former Chief Best through this process. And what that looked like from Black community leaders, from the Black community, what that looked like from the city council, what that looked like from the mayor. And so as African Americans in our community, we always know how challenged we are when placed in these situations. And being police chief, for an entire city and dealing with the pandemic and at the same time dealing with an unprecedented, uprising in Seattle, there's always the opportunity to share opinion on who should have done what and how it should have happened. But at the end of the day, there are going to be some questions, and there should well be, about what does this mean for Black leadership, and how is Black leadership supported in times of crisis when you have to make difficult decisions. And so I think those are good questions and legitimate questions, and I'm certainly eager to share more as we hear from our community and what our community thinks about this as we move forward.
Right, and what do you, it's kind of like a dual thing here in the sense that, we have issues and kind of relating to what people in our community are saying, but then on the flip side, as a media outlet there, how differently do you think that Black media, somebody like Rainier Avenue Radio or the same, is covering these perspectives or issues as opposed to mainstream media? Or is there any other kind of different obligation or approach that we have at looking at something like, say, a Chief Best resignation or the protest, CHOP as a whole, things like that?
I think there is just a shared identity, the same way that you have in mainstream media, for a position of people in communities of color and Black communities. So there is going to be an awareness that we as Black media have about the thoughts and importance of what our community is saying in this regard. There's also going to be an awareness of Chief Best and her struggle and what she's dealing with as she's going through this, because that we know as an African-American woman, there are going to be things that she will have to deal with that could be potentially different for somebody who's not a person of color. And I'm not certainly saying that, what's happened to her is based off of her race. We just know that everywhere we go, race comes with us. And so there's looking at it from that perspective as well. And so for Black media, I think that, we can probably be more insightful about dealing with some of the personal issues that the community may be thinking. I think that we can provide a more in-depth perspective just because of that ability, again, to code switch and not to again use all these different words and share information from the community and the voice of the community to a mainstream audience that makes sense to a mainstream audience. And, our ability to also have personal relationships with, in particular, when it comes to people of color and Black people who are elected officials or people in power, also makes a difference because we know that our voices won't be shut down. We know that in a lot of instances, we have personal connections with these folks, which makes a difference when you're making the phone call. So I think that at this time, it's more critical, not only for Black media, not only for multiracial media, but for people in general, to know that it's the news and you can say it's fact-based, you can say it's fact-based opinion, but when it comes to perspective, it's generally the news as I see it. And it's important to have this voice out there during this time. Now, you may hear a difference of takes on myself and Marcus and you and what we think, but that's because Black people also are not one monolithic group that thinks the same.
Man, Tony B. let the church say amen. I think that's why it's always important. I think we get an echo here. Where's our echo coming from? I think it's also important that that's one of the most important things we talk about is that, like, man, right now what we're hearing is people are saying that it's like blackness is one thing. The people are saying that it's just the Black people say this, the Black people say that. And, I questioned City Hall this morning because I just want to know, like, what Black people you're talking to. And then some people are like, well, they're talking to this group and that group. And that's cool. And I think that whoever, is able to lend a message and everything is welcome. But I think that it's also important for us, for our community specifically, but even for the city, is to, like, man, who the city council is talking to, especially now that we have districts, because it'd be different if it's citywide. Citywide, people have a little skin in the game in all the different neighborhoods and areas across Seattle. And I think that whoever might be influencing the policies and things like that, or the ideas of saying what Black people want, it's important for us to know. What are your thoughts?
Well, let me flip the script on you for a little bit, Omari, and get you to get some feedback and get your voice in on this. As Converge Media, and you have a large voice, have you felt or do you feel any undue pressure to have a specific viewpoint as Black media, to super serve the Black community with maybe things that they want to hear, to also serve other community members, white community, with information that may be for Black folks common knowledge? How do you straddle that? And in a day like today, where we're talking about Carmen Best, resigning and everything behind that, what do you feel? And both for you and Trey, as you do your shows every morning, and now you've got people who rely on you, who don't have all day to go through a whole bunch of media and say, hey, I trust these guys. I trust where they're coming from. I need to get my information from them because I can't do all the due diligence. Does that put any undue pressure on you or change the way you
Well,
think in that situation?
that's a great question, Tony B. Man. Actually, thanks for asking that. I mean, luckily for us, I mean, we've been doing this for a while, not as long as you, but like the morning update show, our big show, we launched it back in March as well, you know, around COVID. But the biggest thing that we get is that people don't know my history and Converge's history in the community. And I mean, we definitely gained a large audience around the protest. So a lot of people think that we're the protest network. And because I'm black, that, you know what I'm saying, this is Converge must be the protest network. I mean, if people follow the streams from day one, it's like, man, just a kid from the Central out here trying to tell the story and call it how I see it. And so, you know, I mean, it would be crazy because our job on the ground is to be able to try to tell as many stories as possible. So we would get a lot of negative feedback because people thought that our job was, you know, that, like I said, we were just a protest network. But I mean, we've been on air well before the protests and everything else, and it's still something every day to be able to tell people like, nah, we didn't just spring up over here. You guys just found out about us. And so that's brought a whole nother issue in itself around our viewership. But I mean, for me, I think this kind of worked well for us is just coming with that regular approach of like, man, just call it like we see it. And I mean, sometimes I'm wrong, and that just means being able to get in front of the camera and the next day and be like, hey, I got that one wrong. But being out here without some kind of left or right agenda and I mean, for us, I really feel like we're out here just as a service to our community. I think the city, the state, I mean, sometimes viewers internationally might all benefit for our coverage, but my job is to kind of sit there and talk to our community. And so because I'm talking to our community, there's a lot of stuff I don't have to worry about explaining because that's our core audience. And people stick around long enough that they do their research and they hang on. But also we try to explain everything in bite-sized pieces. What do you think, TraeAnna?
I mean, I think that's really the case here is that being able to kind of talk to both sides of the story, any narrative, whoever it is, right? Whether it looks like, hey, these guys are kind of pushing, these guys are opposition, let's talk to both. And I think that really showcasing that for the community is super important. Some of the feedback that I hear out there in the community is simply around that. It's just that Converge, they feel like, hey, I can come there, I know I can get it all. You know what I mean? It's not skewed to one side or anything. And so that really does give some benefit. And it was a transition for me, Tony B, because I came from such a community voice, right? And originally everything that I was doing as a co-host was very much so rooted in like, well, community and like, well, this is how I see it, so opinionated. But I love the fact that during the protest, we were able to really showcase both sides, and then people can come to one place and kind of get a little bit of all of it, right? And so I love that we have that.
I will say this, chiming in here, Tony B, is that one of the things that we do find is that you realize kind of like who's watching and who's listening, and it does add an extra layer of responsibility. I don't think that we've ever just been reckless, but it does add an extra layer of responsibility. And you know, I mean, we know what we represent. We represent the Central District. We represent James A. Garfield High School, and our parents and grandparents, and you know, just trying to get it out here. But
that pressure, man, it comes from the outside. But look, Omari does a great job of staying in the middle.
He's seen it, done it all, though. So you know, Tony B's like, yeah, okay.
He knows.
Well, what is from both of you, and I know this is again one of those critical issues that people want to hear now. And when you're giving this combination of journalism, hard facts, with you know, putting your opinion in there, what are your thoughts as Converge Media, as the morning update show, with the resignation of Carmen Best? What do you think the ripple effect of that is going to have in our communities? You know, based off of your conversations with folks, how we move forward at this point as a city, you know, in dealing with some of the complex and nuanced issues that have arisen from the George Floyd murders that have now evolved into a number of different things taking center stage. Yeah. What do y'all think?
Well, I'll say this. I think it's very important that relationship building come back into the fold as a primary way and approach for the police to start moving forward, right? If it's now going to be Chief Diaz, I think it's great. But what we need to do is build relationships, right? So that way, we get to understand who is working in our neighborhoods. We know the officers. We start having opportunities to engage with them outside of the criminal system. And so for me, I think so much of it is about relationship building. Again, with some of the demands coming from the community, there's an incremental process that the city's going to have to go through in order to do a defund by 50% in the right ways, right? And bringing in community-rooted solutions that have, culturally responsive methods like, hey, we're going to come in, we're going to do de-escalation, we're going to do a healing circle, we're going to do, restorative justice, we're going to do different practices to kind of de-escalate situations. But I think right now in the beginning, it's going to need some real opportunities for relationship building to occur, because I think that that's really where the misnomer is between the police and the community. So I think we need more opportunities to engage.
Me personally, I think that we need to be trying to play the long game here. We need to be trying to think, one generation from now, young kids in the Central District, what it's going to look like for them in 10 or 20 years. And the thing is the defund is here today. Chief Best, she's resigned today. But at the end of the day, if the state of black people in this city do not change, because you see defund, the things you're seeing in the streets, those are all the symptoms. Yeah. And so if we don't treat the disease, what's occurring in our city, when we talk about the economic gap between black households, $42,500 a year, the average white household, $105,000 a year. These are systemic things that need to be addressed. When you talk about home ownership, constantly in decline, home ownership is what leads to generational wealth. When you talk about Seattle public schools, failing black children right there, that's the long game. The conversation today is the short game. Right. And the short game is important too. So whether you agree with defund or disagree, that's the short game. I mean, and the chief has resigned today, but no chief is going to be there forever. Right. The bigger questions that need to be asked is, what are the systemic changes that are going to occur in Seattle? I mean, those are my three things that I've been talking about, but there's even more though. The income gap, home ownership and the lack thereof due to gentrification and a bunch of other things, and the horrible state of black children in public schools. If those are not addressed, then it could be 5 years from now, be another CHOP, 10 years from now, it's another defund and everything else. I think that we all need to be thinking long term here in Seattle, because that's the only way for us to be able to find solutions that will be long lasting. What are your thoughts on that, Tony?
Well said, Omari. And I think, again, that's the beautiful thing about having the perspective of black media here, because there's definitely going to be some consideration given to the long term. So often when it comes to black people, it's what can we do to fix the crisis that they're dealing with right now? There's an alligator trying to bite our arm off. There's one 30 feet away. Which one are you going to pay most attention to? And usually in sensational situations with media, what you get is that version of African Americans are facing an alligator about to bite their arm off. Well, you know what? If we survive this, we still got to worry about the one 30 feet away. And looking at it from that perspective, you get more insight into some of the critical issues and dynamics that, again, as you mentioned, Omari, are systemic. So you can talk about defund the police. That's one thing. Maybe we should defund education. If so much money is going into education and we're not getting the results from that, because at the core of this,
$1 billion school district,
how we teach our children is just as important as police brutality. And, and the things that are happening, maybe there are systems set up where people from the community could do a far better job. We have HBCUs for a reason. there are things we call them PWIs because everything that's not an HBCU is a PWI. And so it's the same thing with media. We call it black media
Yeah.
because everything else isn't. There are other media that I will give props to, though, in other communities that have strong media relationships, that they can rely on. And so at the end of the day, I just think it's important for us to provide a well-rounded perspective as media. Sometimes people aren't going to be digging that. Sometimes they may feel it's supportive of what they believe in. Sometimes they may feel it's unsupportive of what they believe in. But I think too often, which has happened now with the protests and what we're calling progress, our message has been co-opted by louder voices, voices with more influence. But we continue to be that Horton hears the who, and people are starting to say, ooh, I hear you in there.
and this is something I want to talk to you about, Tony. Is speaking of that, man. Where, in your viewpoint, where is the Seattle protest? Is it still on message? Has it lost message? Has it been co-opted? Is it on point? I mean, what are you seeing, and what's some of the feedback that you're getting from people who frequent Rainier Avenue Radio?
The feedback that I get from the Black community is it's off mark. The feedback that we get from other members of our community, of the Brown communities, are, again, this is an opportunity for voice, to share, again, systemic oppressions that are impacting and affecting everybody. The feedback that I'm getting from white members of our community is all over the place. I think that there is now an attempt to understand what, we're calling allyship is and what that looks like and what it means to be of assistance. And, how do I suddenly, do this super fast learning of something that I haven't been paying attention to so that I can be supportive of causes and ideas that I thought I supported, but have I really supported them for the last number of years that I've been alive? And so there's a lot of things that are going on in the community, in the white communities in that regard, from what I'm hearing. The loudest voices that I hear in the Black community, again, just feel like the message has been co-opted. Now, times have changed and things change, but in particular for those who understand that marches were things that were jeopardizing your life whenever you went out. Your dogs were sicked on you, hoses, people were threatened and killed. And again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with those who are protesting now, but there's a difference when you're out there, kind of having a festival and playing music and you're, and I'm not saying, that the confrontation that happened has been started by the protesters, but it's just a different feel when when you go out there, no matter what you do, you can get cracked in the skull with a baton for the things that you believed in, and the response that you're going to get from the police and the larger community is, well, you should have never had your black ass out in the street in the first place. That's a different kind of protest. And times have evolved and times have changed, and the messaging can still be effective. And I think that we'll just have to continue to cover it as news media and let the story unfold and write itself, and we'll just tell the story.
Right. And now we've got Marcus Harrison Green of the South Seattle Emerald is joining us right now. How are you, Marcus?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me.
All right. So my understanding is you just got off an interview with a council member, right?
Oh, with Council President Lorena Gonzalez, yes. Just recently wrapped that up and came on board here to join you all. So thank you.
All right. You got to let Council President Gonzalez know that black media matters. You know what I'm saying? We got a show going on over here. You feel me?
Very much.
Marcus, welcome to the panel. So the question I just asked Tony B is, what is the state of protest here in Seattle? What are South Seattle Emerald readers saying? Is it still on message? Is it on point? Has it been co-opted? Does it represent black people? Does it now represent all people? Is it supposed to represent all people? Is it supposed to just represent a change of black people's lives? What are your thoughts, Marcus?
And you gave me a lot for a multiple choice, I guess.
You be all right.
No, no. I mean, honestly, it's all the above, right? I mean, and it just shows you. It just goes back to the adage, man, that change is untidy and change is messy. And there are obviously some people who say, cats need to be out in the streets, even if the message is imperfect every single day, just because we need to, constantly hammer this message home, right? That Black Lives Matter, and we need accountability from the city. When it comes to Black people, Black economic power in the city. So, uh, it's one of those things where it's like, what is the right tool and message, um, to gain that, right? I mean, if with that being said, without protest, right, I don't think we'd be having this conversation about defund SPD and allocating this money towards some Black and brown organizations in terms of the $17 million that the city council earmarked yesterday for them. So it's one of those things that I guess I don't know if you can measure it necessarily now in terms of the effectiveness. I think you have to wait a little while, and 6 months to a year from now, and see what actually has transpired from these actions and these demonstrations. And I think that's the best judgment and best measure. It's just, quite frankly, just time. And I know everybody wants everything overnight, so that's maybe not a satisfactory answer, but it's at the end of the day, it's the one that I feel is the best one for me, at least.
Right. It represents kind of, what you're seeing and how we'll see things kind of play out over time, right? Because that'll really be the ultimate answer for all of this. My question for you, Marcus, we were talking a little bit earlier just about the resignation of Chief Carmen Best. We got to get your opinion on this. Let's have you weigh in. How were your thoughts? What were you thinking when the news dropped this morning?
I mean, I think it was a cross between startled and yet not surprised at the same time, right? I mean, I think it was going this way for some time, to be honest with you. And if you look at the letter that was dated, the copy of the letter that she sent out to SPD officers, it was obvious that this has been brewing for weeks. And I think it came to a standpoint where so people needed sacrificial lamb, if you will. And I think, honestly, unfortunately, in this case, it happened to be our police chief.
There we go. Thank you. So just to follow up here real quick, we discussed a bit earlier about the communication or lack thereof between the city council and the chief of police, and also trimming the chief's pay. What's your thoughts on the situation between the city council and the police chief?
I mean, in just getting off of a meeting or interview with Council President Gonzalez, when I asked her that question about communication, she said that she felt that there was clear communication every week, and that Chief Best, her intentions and so forth were known to the council. Now, grant you you talked to the Chief Best about that, and it's a different story. I mean, Chief Best laid that out, I think, in her press conference today, where she felt that that was not the case. And so it's one of those things where it's kind of a she said kind of thing. Grant you, at the end of the day, I think it was people talking at each other, not necessarily with each other, and ultimately, I don't think that was going to change whether Chief Best had stayed in her position or not. It was just a point where I think it was both factions, if you will, were kind of intractable, and I didn't see a pathway, at least from the outside looking in. I certainly didn't see a pathway forward where there was going to be any congruence or agreement, and so something had to give, and it gave. And again, I mean, I don't think you can't police anybody's. You shouldn't be able to police anybody's opinion or grief, our feelings about the chief stepping down. I mean, that the Black community is not a monolith. There are people who are celebrating the news. There are people who are bemoaning the news. And so I think at this point we just need to, Sebastian, hey, this happens, and we're moving forward, and we just need to, and hopefully we can do it in a way that is a more unified approach with SPD, City Council, and and that's kind of how I see things at this point.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, and I know you're late because the council president. I tell you, man, you gotta respect black media, man. You know what I'm saying? We only got an hour here, but
Hey, there been plenty of times I've been running on CP time, so I dig it.
That's what I'm saying, man. We Converge, man. We on time. We send the signal. But what we talked about here, real quick. And then I'll top it over to Tony in case he has a question for us or for a question for you. Is what we talked about is that, man, this defund conversation is a conversation today. Chief Best staying on the job or resigning is a conversation today, whether you like it or not. Defund, whether you like it or not. The bigger questions is the long game. What's going to happen today that's going to change the trajectory of the black community in Seattle? In 20 years from now, we look up and say, man, in 2020, these things happened here. And 10 years later, 20 years later, we see this trajectory here of increase in black income and home ownership and awesome schools. You tell me, man.
That's $1 billion question. I would tell you, I mean, after Monday's vote, after everything else that has transpired, I mean, I don't see any systemic transformation necessarily happening. And I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know if I'm hopeful for that, right? I mean, you drop down from, you say it all the time, right? The city, for instance, used to be 72% black. Now it's in close to single digits. South Seattle, very, very similarly situated. I don't know what, if anything, is going to, without any drastic change, and I'm talking about like monumental change. I don't know what's going to, keep folks here, to be quite frank with you. And ultimately, I mean, that's the conversation. I mean, the city council talks about their desire to put money in the hands of folks in black and brown communities to sort of ensure our thriving and flourishing here. But what does that mean? And who's getting the money? Like, two, what are they doing with it? And three, what does that accountability look like to this community? And again, like you said, I mean, what is the plan to make sure that we are here in 20 years? And like I say, not having this conversation, we're not, the South Puyallup enrolled or, Converge, in Puyallup are the moments. And
right.
I know I'll be real. I had this conversation with Tony pretty frequently, so I'm wondering, Tony, what your thoughts are on what Omari asked.
And I kind of talked about it a bit, but it goes back to, I think that at the end of the day, something that I'd like to ask both of you as we move forward with whatever rolls out is going to roll out, and we are going to cover it. And so, again, let me reaffirm for people who may, the solid background that each of you has in just journalism, basic fundamental journalism, and what that is and what that means and how you apply that. And, the part of what I'm wondering from both of you is, well, first of all, do you think of yourselves as the owners and managers of a media company first? Or do you think I'm a black media company, or do you think that there is a certain responsibility that goes along with that? Because we're talking about black media, and how to balance that line moving forward, where you're certainly, judged. Anybody looking at this right now is going to say, "Oh, black media." Now, that doesn't mean that we don't cover all sorts of things, but from both of your perspectives. And building what you have built, as you move forward, how do you personally deal with that? Do you see the label as a black media, or do you say, well, wait a minute, this is confining me, this is a box, Or do you see that as an inevitable systemic oppression that continues to exist, that because of the color of our skin, we will be black media, like it or not?
That's a great question, Tony.
If I could jump in here real quick. So for me, the best thing is from day one, we've been saying that we're from the Central District of Seattle, that we're a proudly black network. That's our neighborhood. That's who we talking to. That's who we broadcast to. I mean, of course, where our audience is grown and is growing, but you know, I'm proud of that. And the one thing I'm proud of with Converge is at points, the whole world's really watching. So whether they want to see me as black media or not, they're watching. And for sure, I don't have our vision that we wrote four years ago for this was that we just want to be a leading platform for black and urban content in the Pacific Northwest. So I wear that with a badge of honor that this is a black-owned media company from the Central District of Seattle. And man, we're going to continue to communicate to our core audience. We play Lift Every Voice and Sing every day at the end of the morning update show. So, you know, I'm very proud of this accomplishment. I'm proud. My father, a generation before me, opened the first black-owned photography studio here in Seattle with the help of Mr. Fitzgerald Beaver, who started the Facts newspaper. So you guys see me smile on camera in a minute. Thank you for asking that question, Tony B. This is a proud black-owned media company. Thank you, sir. And I went to a historically black college and university. Big shout out Elizabeth City State University, where I was on air there on WRVS 89.9 ECSU. My friend, this media is in me. It's not on me.
Let me add too, I mean, literally, let me just say that is also why I got so excited to bring my talents to this platform. At the end of the day, black voices are not uplifted in major media. Black media streams are not in the major discourse that's happening in people's homes. So I think that bringing this to the forefront, bringing this to the audience and the community, that's why I got so excited, because literally I don't want to just be a reporter on King 5 or working as a journalist and doing and producing stories for some of these major media outlets. They don't care about what's going on in our community. So I got really excited when Omari said, man, we're going to uplift what's happening in our community. We're going to uplift information for our community. We're going to educate them on the COVID resources that are out here. That's what got me excited, because nobody else, King 5 ain't coming down here to see what's up with Earls or Trey Lamont. So that makes me excited that we can uplift our brilliance in our community and be very unapologetically black about it. Love that.
And Marcus, the same question for you. And I mentioned, and I kind of
bro, I can't top that. I can't top them two.
Tag team.
Winter Twin Powers unite.
One of the things that I mentioned earlier was that we are not a monolithic group of people, nor are we a monolithic group of media content providers. And so our perspectives and our perceptions and our presentations, you know, should be welcome. And so let me get your feedback on that. As the South Seattle Emerald, how do you feel about that? How do you address that? Are you Marcus, the publisher? Marcus, are there times when you have to say, man, I'm Marcus, I'm also the black guy, and then other times where you're making these decisions about what you're going to be doing, who you're going to be talking to, what you're going to be giving front page, initiative to. And you have to weigh in that, well, is my personal blackness the thing that I want to get across, or is there another story that supersedes this?
No, I mean, I think it's a good question, Tony. I mean, I think for me, it's always the fidelity to the story, the fidelity to the community. And our thing is always, what stories aren't being told? Where is the darkness, in terms of the news media, so that we can go and we can cover it. It's a double entendre there with darkness. But and how do we present a story in a way that like nobody else is, right? And how do we have an angle that nobody else is? For me, when I started the Emerald, I wanted to one day overcome and be, the Seattle Times. It wasn't, no disrespect to the Medium or Facts or anything like that, but it was like, no, I want to be, when you talk about being a publisher, when Frank Bluffton wakes up every day, he's the owner of the Seattle Times. I'm sure he's not, I'm the maven for white media. What do I need to do today? It's like, no, I'm the paper of record for this city, and I'm going to cover it, and potentially cover it from the lens that he does. But for me, it's the same thing. It's like I want to wake up one day and say, I want the Emerald to be the paper of record for this area, and say, for the entire city, and wake up and say, I'm gonna cover it today, and yeah, it's going to be from a black lens. And so what?
Right. If I could just jump in here real quick, one thing that we found over here is that, and so I'm grateful for our viewers and people that log in, is that when you create a quality product, then people just, when they gravitate towards a quality product. And my friend, we got a long way to go. You know what I'm saying? I mean, compared to our two very established, esteemed colleagues over here, you know what I'm saying? We're definitely the new kids on the block.
Amari, please,
no,
bro.
no, don't
I was asking for $20 the other day, so we ain't too seen.
We just know how to scramble fast. We just know how to scramble fast on our feet. And now we're back at kind of zero here because we got a big empty studio. So we got to work on that. But one thing that I'm seeing is it's the quality. When the product is quality, then most people, irregardless of color, they rocking with you. You know what I'm saying? Irregardless, and it's crazy. One thing that we found is how many people far right and extremely left, they're on the platform, and they're on the platform because, man, we're able to deliver some content consistently in a great looking package, professionally. And so I think that doing a good job, doing a great job, excellent job, it cuts through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so I'm sure that some people got their hangups early on. It was this black media, is this guy, whatever. But I think a lot of people familiarize themselves with what we're producing here. And for most people, that just goes out the window.
Yeah.
They're just trying to rock with the content.
Yeah, well, I think even too, what I hear in the community, oh, go ahead, Tony.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think you hit that, right on the head. That the goal is to provide quality content. The blackness is something that is inherent. At maybe for us on this particular conversation, something that is inherent, from our life experiences. But that varies from person to person. But at the end of the day, I think, that these are examples. The South Seattle Emerald, Converge Media, Rainier Avenue Radio, of the fact that there is a level of excellence that we all think is important into how we do what we do. And it doesn't matter, what the blackness is if we don't achieve that.
Right.
Absolutely. I was just going to say and add that that's actually what I hear out there, right? When people are approaching me and they're like, man, I just love the morning update show. What they're saying is that we're doing a great job of giving the narratives and reporting the stories that are happening in the Emerald City. That's what they're saying, right? It's not that they're like, man, I'm just happy that black folks are on. Yeah, some people might feel that way. I take that too. I take it all. But I do hear this resonating kind of discourse about, man, you guys are just reporting it in the ways that I needed to hear it. You guys are talking to the people that you guys are asking questions I wanted to ask. And that's the brilliance of this. Sometimes you got to dig into it's about the content,
Tony B, I know that the Rainier Avenue Radio platform is really a platform that's rooted in diversity. And serving a number of different communities, even a number of different languages. So how does that play out to you as this black media house founder, who a big portion of what you're doing is serving all kinds of different communities?
Well, Omari, I am unashamedly proud of my blackness. And
all right now,
I don't have to figure out how to wear it because I wear it, and I have no control over people who do that. So having said that, working with diverse populations, working with multicultural populations, I think gives me some insight into the particular struggles that they may have, or the need that they have to share their narrative. It's time to look back historically, and you look at the Four Amigos, Bernie Whitebear but don't let me run, Uncle Bob Santos and Larry Gossett and El Centro, Roberto Maestes. One of the things that they figured out early was the need to combine resources and work together. And now you're hearing these conversations where you're trying to change the imaging instead of words like marginalized communities and oppressed. Now you're hearing global majority and more uplifting, words to describe for people to have a better self-determination of who they are. And so, for me, it's very comfortable for me to be definitely Black in my awareness, but then it's also not a stretch for me to be able to report on, to address issues of all communities. And I think it's important to get that out there as well. I'm Black, yes. But you know what? What position are you coming from? Um, what what is it that in your community you find to be important? That's what I want to have expressed. Now, if you want me to put a spin on it, where you've asked, well, I can say, well, you know what, I can identify with what you're talking about if that question is asked of me. But the experience is one that comes from that particular community. And so, whether we're talking about Japanese internment and how that changed the course in the face of Seattle, from Japanese community members getting uprooted from major properties in Bellevue and having that turn into downtown Bellevue, to talking about, all of us essentially arriving in the central district at some point and moving out to the south end. It shows the ability of, again, Black people to be as diverse as we are as human beings, and at the same time, still retain the pride in the struggle that we all know that we face together.
Yeah, and I mean, and just to oh, sorry, Marty, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead, Marcus.
I was just gonna say, I mean, to piggyback on what Tony was saying, I mean, as somebody who grew up in the South End at a time when it was the most diverse, it housed three of the most diverse zip codes, where it was 80 something languages that were spoken, and 60 or 70 something different ethnicities. I mean, as proudly Black as I am, and as much as I love my Blackness and unapologetically so, right? It would be almost criminal of me to omit stories of other cultures, other folks, this rich diversity and tapestry that we have in this area, simply to only focus right on specifically on the Black community. And so for me, it's you can't make up one omission in terms of what mainstream media, usually omitting the stories of the Black community, or at least not telling them in a way that they should be told, by omitting other stories on on our platforms. And so that's certainly what the Emerald tries to do, is again provide authentic stories of this community and what's going on. And as we always say, it's like the opposite of what had passed for media coverage in this area, meaning constant coverage of tragedy and crime isn't necessarily just positivity and PR for any community. That the opposite of tragedy is nuance and multidimensionality and complexity, and that's what all three of our organizations bring every single day.
What I was going to say to that was that I think you're so right in that regard. But you're so right in that regard. Is that really, again, these independent media channels, they have the ability to tell the stories that aren't being told, right? So it's not just about one community or just the Black community, right? But you're so right in terms of the diversification of our communities and being able to tell what's happening on the ground. To me, that's the benefit. You know what I mean? So much so when it comes to community media, the benefit is that we're going to be telling stories that aren't told, right? And it goes across all of our ethnicities that really embody our communities.
Right. Over here, we always said that The mainstream media, and I don't mean that in a bad way, just big media. They have a monopoly on the bad news. That's where they put their investment at, in helicopters, satellite uplinks, wire dispatches, and everything else. They got a monopoly on that. So we came into this saying that we gonna put paint where it ain't. And where the paint ain't is telling great, amazing stories about our people. And that's really where Converge emerged, is that how can we put paint where it ain't? And you talked about there's all these tragic stories about black people and everything else. How can we use this media platform, man, to show a different side of the story, to show some things that are enlightening and lift up people? So, it's been interesting thus far, but I know one thing for sure is that with us having a core audience that we broadcast to and that we're communicating to, and that's the black community in Seattle, it kind of makes it easy for us as well, because we can really focus on that and focus on stories and deliver stories to them. And I think that fortunately a lot of people outside of our neighborhood have been able to benefit from the coverage. Tony B, you are the dean. You're the dean of the class, sir, and this show's getting ready to come to an end. You always ask the best questions. I hope to reach your level one of these days. So I'm going to leave it up to you to pose the last question out here for Marcus, TraeAnna, and myself.
Okay, well, I first want to make sure that anybody who was listening who misinterpreted when I called Marcus a boy and said he's eloquent. As black media, we know what the joke was about that. That goes back to he speaks so well,
He's
and
nice
so,
and clean.
Don't misinterpret what that incredible, amazing man has done. That was an inside joke for those of you who well, what? Can I say that? No, I'm not giving you
I didn't take it any other way, Tony, so what you
to say that. But I guess just moving forward, I would like to know how both of you would address
You keep saying both, but I'm here too, Tony.
I'm sorry, Trey. And
don't get beat up. He's actually from the district.
Converge. I'll just say y'all.
He was talking about you, Trey. He was opening Omari.
I do apologize, and yes, continue to speak up for yourself. But my sincerest apologies if that's how it came across. And if anybody out there disrespects Trey, I'm coming after you too. Don't think that any of this is okay. Trey is amazing. She said we talked a couple years ago. We did the work, and I've seen her in her support of this community in a number of different ways. So don't let my age and senility think that you get away with some stuff with these folks. But the question for both of you is, what would be the advice that you have to a generation growing up now that's experiencing different things, that's experiencing multiculturalism in a different way, that's experiencing, again, these protests in a different way, and whether they have a responsibility or what that would be in terms of sharing information and becoming the next generation of media content providers, and how they can advocate on behalf of their peers, and at the same time take into consideration the value that they bring in having their voices heard.
Yeah,
man, Tony B.
That's a great
asked
one.
Hard question. I feel like I'm back at school. Yeah, you take that first, Marcus.
I'll answer so I can give our wonderful host the last word. But I will say, I was talking to some fellows with the Washington bus today, and they asked a similar question, and I will just say the same thing. It's staying in your truth, and when I say that, I always say that we, especially in media, especially with social media and so forth, so much of social media is a nuance destroyer, meaning that it is a mechanism for the most part, short, pithy, quotes, and it shows that there's been a study that shows that misinformation, for the most part, travels much faster than truth does on social media channels. And so I would just very much advocate that people always use, especially the new media makers, just always, adhere to, critical thinking. And as I always say, simplicity will always lose out for the most part to complexity. Simplicity rarely loses to complexity in the public sphere. And what we need in this time period where we're constantly bombarded with information and not enough truth. And we need truth. And you derive truth through the lens of critical thinking, through the lens of complexity, through the lens of nuance. And I would just continue to promote folks to just continue to seek truth, even if it's uncomfortable at times, because the truth very seldom owes us comfort, and it doesn't entitle us to anything except itself. And so, just always be truth seekers, and I will pass it along to our host today.
Well, what I'll say to this and what I'll add to it, because I totally agree with that, Marcus. I think you also need to tell the stories that really move you and motivate you. As a young media producer, when I was younger, all I wanted to do was spotlight like what people were doing because I was so excited by it, right? And for me, that presented a focus and an in-depth focus for me on those projects that allowed for the content to be very comprehensive, but yet sizable that people could absorb it, and learn from it. And so for me, I would say, I come from this creative space. I think so much of what is done in this world of content creation and literally around media is really the way you're telling a story. And so I would say if you're moved by something happening in your community, happening in your city, your town, be inspired by it and tell those stories, allow those stories to get some light. Because a lot of the times they don't from major media or anybody who's kind of got a big major show. So start right there. Start in the community that you love, you grew up in. It'll really help you to tell stories and find stories that really motivate you.
Right. And I would say, Tony B, that if I'm giving advice to people now coming into this space, it's like, man, this is literally the greatest time ever. The technology, you can make a whole movie on your phone. The access to distribution is no longer a barrier. And that used to make things prohibitive for a lot of people. And that being the case, I think that it comes to echoing some of what both of my colleagues have said here, is it be true in it. And man, the truth a lot of times is ugly. And the truth can be painful. And believe me, we saw a lot of ugly truth during the last 2 months here. I witnessed a lot of ugly truth. But you have to be willing to be able to see and say the truth as you see it, and be committed. The other thing is that when something is difficult, it makes it so hard that when you achieve it, man, you're committed to it. You're not just throwing it away. But when it's very easy, like right now, anybody can turn on a phone. You know what I'm saying? And that kind of questions the commitment. How many people are going to continue to tell stories whenever the protests end, whenever that might happen? How many people, and those are the people I think that you're going to see continuing on something. Some people are going to put their phone down, no action in the streets, and they'll move on, they'll do something else. And we'll see how many people continue their storytelling through their phone and their cameras afterwards. Another thing is is passion, is to be passionate about telling them what it is. Whatever your passion is. For us, we're passionate about our community and our community members, and I think that's where it shows. But I would say passion and truth. The live director, Mr. Carlos Imani, who's done a great job today, is telling us that we are over time, so we're going to get ready to hop out of here. Before we do, Tony B, please tell people how they can reach you.
You can find us, again, some shameless self-promotion.
Go for it.
Rainieravenueradio.world, and I do want to give a plug out to Big Day of Play, which is taking place on Saturday. An event that takes place in South Seattle annually. It's usually a physical manifestation of exercise and get moving and families coming together. This year it's going to be virtual, and we do have Big Day of Play kits with all kinds of balls and frisbees and jump ropes and pedometers that we're giving away. And then you can do it at home and play virtually. So just, wanted to remind people that event in South Seattle is still taking place. But you can check us out at RainierAvenueradio.world. And then because it is what it is, after that, we're going to be going live to HempFest, which isn't taking place this year. But we're going to do kind of a memorial service, and then the actual HempFest will take place October 10th and 11th. So this Saturday, Big Day of Play at Rainier Community Center, and after that, we'll be coming live from the Sculpture Park in honor of what HempFest would be, except because of coronavirus. It ain't gonna be
Man,
there.
it's gonna be a lot of
Yeah.
people sitting in their room smoking and toking. Big shout out to the big day of play. Big shout out to Lakima Bell, everybody down there at Seattle Parks and Recreation. They had a big challenge this year. It was like, how do you do the big day of play virtually? And it sounds like they figured it out. And much love to Rainier Avenue Radio, man, for really getting the word out there about the big day of play. You know, Lakima, man, she don't play down there.
No, she don't, man. And every year it is packed.
Big supporter of community. Marcus Harrison Green, he says that we always got to put the Harrison in there. He's going to send his mama down there to set me straight. Tell people how they can keep up with you, brother.
They can follow me at SeattleEmerald.world, and they can follow my podcast that I do with the great Enrique Cerna at LifeOnTheMargins.com. We post daily content, so please check us out. And thank you again, Omari and Trey, for having me on today.
All right, so Tony B and Marcus, I think that you guys both know that man, teamwork makes the dream work. We put this together in less than like 4 or 5 hours, because I just thought it was important for us guys to kind of come together in our own kind of vernacular, in our own comfort zone, and talk about what we want to talk about right here. So can you guys join me in giving a hand to our director today, Carlos Amani, and to our producer today, Nikki Barron, and they turned this whole show around in less than 4 hours. So big shot there. For us, we're back out tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Tony B, Rainier Avenue Radio, Marcus Green, South Seattle Emerald. Thank you so much, brothers. And man, if you guys are out there, you've come in here today in the Converge platform, I'm going to ask, because we got some really great people who view our platform and follow us. If you guys aren't following and supporting Rainier Avenue Radio, please do that. If you guys are not following the South Seattle Emerald, please do that. Let's support Black media. Matter of fact, let's support excellent media, because that's who everybody in this video today represent.
Absolutely.
God bless everybody. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, TraeAnna.
Thank you.
Until then, peace.
Peace.
Peace.